Hello everyone and welcome to watching, I'm just going to say welcome to everyone watching this panel around the UK. Thanks so much for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Martin Dugan and I've been working in the media industry for around 10 years. Started off at Channel 4 as part of the talent search for the Paralympic Games in 2012. And now I live with BBC Newsround, the children's news programme in Salford at the moment. I'm in an edit suite, so it's not that glamorous. In this session today, we're going to be asking, is TV somewhere you can work if you have a disability? And hopefully, we're going to be saying, yes, you can, no matter who you are or what your disability you may have. I'm going to be chatting to some amazing and talented people who all work within the industry and who just so happen to have disabilities, or they work with people who do. Now, there will be plenty of time for questions, so please make sure you get them into us. Now, before I get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about this week's event organised by the Royal Television Society Midlands. Now, this is our most ambitious careers fair yet. This 4-day event has brought together people from across the world of broadcasting for 6 hours of live stream sessions, masterclasses and workshops each day. I have to say a big thank you to our sponsor, the National Film and Television School, a leading global institution who have developed some of Britain and the world's most creative talent. Now go to the RTS website to find out more about the Careers Fair and to sign up for sessions or catch up with those that you've missed with the hashtag RTS Careers Fair. So please talk about us as much as you can, get chatting. Now, I'd like to also take this opportunity to say thank you to See Here, the BBC's magazine show for the deaf, for providing Mike, our BSL interpreter. Now, for anyone who is deaf, you can pin Mike on this chat. The people on this panel come from all parts of the industry and have their own experiences with disability. They're also very keen to help you realise your dream, no matter what that may be. Now, introducing today, we've got Julie Shaw, Jay Francis, Corey Brown, and Doug Hope. Now, I can say loads about these people, but it's better coming from the people themselves. So I'm going to come to you first, Julie. Hiya. Now, if you can please just tell us, a little bit about yourself, what it is that you do, and your experiences with disability during your career.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am one of the commissioners, the commissioning editors that work at the BBC, and I work on daytime and early peak programmes. I also oversee some peak commissions like Great British Menu, and also a lot of our programmes that we make in daytime end up on peak as well, like Fake Britain and The Sheriffs Are Coming and so on, and I look after those as well. So it's been, so that's me. I was born with a condition. I've got an identical twin sister who doesn't have anything wrong with her, but I was born with disability, and at 1 year old had one of my legs removed through the knee, so I don't have my knee. So I walk. You will see, if you could see me walk, you would know straight away that I had a disability. That's my disability. I'm happy to discuss it and to answer any questions about it. I always wanted to be a journalist from when I was really little, or as far back as I can remember. My mum and dad, I come from a really working class background in the north of Scotland as well. My mum was a cleaner, my dad is a postman, or was a postman. And that he always made us be quiet and shut up. I had 2 sisters, so we were always chatting in a big chatting household. And the one time we were not allowed to speak was when we were watching the news. So I always wanted to be a journalist and tell stories, and that's exactly what's happened. And I think I'm living proof that you can work in television and have a disability and have a very successful career. It's not always been a bed of roses, but it's been enjoyable. It is enjoyable. It's not that it's not enjoyable now. It is enjoyable.
Yeah, thanks for that, Julie. Thanks very much. Doug, I'm going to come to you next, if it's possible, with the same questions that I asked Julie before.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Doug McCarthy. I work down in Bristol for the BBC Natural History Unit, obviously quite well known for making Blue Planet 2 and the Planet Earths of this world, and recently 7 Worlds, 1 Planet, which seem to be focused much on planets, but that's our playground. We I personally don't have a disability, but I have employed and have worked with both presenters and members of production that do. And I'm very much here just to sort of make sure that if people have a dream and ambition to work in natural history or in television, then nothing should hold them back, really.
Thank you. Corey, we'll come to you next.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Corey Brown. I work for Channel 4 as a continuity announcer. So we're the people that talk on the TV between the programmes. Lots of stuff goes on behind the scenes to make that happen. I've done that for Channel 4 for nearly 20 years now, which makes me sound incredibly old. And before that, I was at the BBC. I started out as a continuity announcer there through a training scheme that they had. Just to wind back to when I was very little, by the age of about 11 or 12, I knew I wanted to be a radio presenter, which kind of came about from winning a competition on a local radio station and going down and realizing that people got paid money for playing records. And I just thought that, and talking, and I just thought that is just the ultimate dream job. And I spent most of my teenage years sort of doing work experience where I wrote loads of letters, long before the days of Twitter and LinkedIn and stuff. So literally had to write letters to people and, you know, knock on doors. Did a languages degree at university, but did lots of student radio there. So when I came out the other side, my first jobs were in local radio. And then, as I say, moved to the BBC and then on to Channel 4. I'm also co-chair of Channel 4's 4 Purple Network, which is our disability staff network, ERG. And my disability is I have a severe sight impairment. So that's me.
Thank you. And last but not least, we're going to come to Jay.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Jay Francis. I'm an editor on Escape to the Country. I'm currently working in High Wycombe, but I worked in Birmingham for 16 years, working my way up to this position. I was born with cerebral palsy, and I've just worked through education. Really wanted to do something in the media. So I did media courses, and I did a lot of work experience in Birmingham way back in the 90s and the early 2000s. Built up lots of contacts and use that as a basis to get in touch with people once I'd finished education, to start building up my work. Yeah, so that's me. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I just want to say thanks everybody for taking the time to come to this panel. It's really good to have you on, and I'm excited to hear about, you know, what we're going to discuss here today, because I'll just reiterate what the big question is really for this discussion. It's, is TV somewhere that you can work if you have a disability? And I think I'm going to come to you first, Corey, if you don't mind. Is it somewhere you can work if you have a disability through your experience? Tell us what your experience has been like since you first began, and whether you think now TV industry caters for people that have a wide range of disabilities.
Yeah, sure. So to answer the question, I absolutely think it is. I think TV is growing increasingly inclusive. There's obviously quite a clamour now for, you know, the real Britain to be represented on TV. And so we're not talking just about presenters though, we're talking about, you know, behind the scenes in production. And also it's worth remembering there's loads of jobs in telly that on the face of it, you kind of think are not necessarily to do with TV, you know, accounting and HR and all that kind of side of things as well. So when you're thinking about TV careers, it's not just behind or in front of a camera necessarily. Certainly in my time at Channel 4, I've seen us really evolve as a business from somewhere where you know, I was young and I guess to a degree quite naive, and at the very beginning of my career thought that I was quite invincible, and obviously didn't want my visual impairment to be the reason that people didn't employ me, and basically sort of tried to, seems a bit ridiculous to say it now, but almost to sort of put that part of me in my back pocket and totally ignore it and just kind of blaze through. So I didn't know anything about access to work until I'd been at Channel 4. So never mind the BBC, they didn't, you know, it wasn't ever a real kind of thing for discussion, but at Channel 4 I'd been there for 9 years before I even knew that actually I was entitled to ask for some equipment. So I'd effectively been putting my own adjustments in place and sort of making everything work for me, and sort of it was quite a relief actually to discover that there are some things in place that can be helpful. And I think the one lesson I've learned, and the one thing I would say certainly to my younger self and to anybody who's coming up now, is just to kind of not be scared to own your impairment, and to never think that it's a sign of weakness to ask for a little bit of help, because actually I think it can be really empowering for you and for everybody. And so the industry has evolved, and I think I've certainly evolved myself. I'm assuming other people might feel the same way about this, but yeah, so to answer the question, yeah, I do think TV is welcoming. I think it's still a bit of a thorny road, and you've got to be prepared to have some, you know, slightly awkward conversations. But I think the broadcasters, you know, the industry has a responsibility to kind of open the doors to enable those conversations. But then equally, we have a responsibility to be able to advocate for ourselves, because people aren't mind readers. So you can't, you know, people won't know what they can do to be helpful. I think we're not helped by the fact that the word disability sounds very negative, but we kind of got to get over that and get to that kind of point of sort of greater enlightenment. And that comes through talking and through being open and a bit honest and a bit vulnerable, I guess, to a degree, but in a positive way. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it certainly does. Thank you very much, Corey. That's great. Jay, I'm going to come to you with the same question, actually, because I know I'm trying to keep the questions as varied as possible, but I know that I'd like to hear it from, you know, different disabilities, different perspectives, because of the audience that we have, if you don't mind. So would you agree with what Corey says?
Yeah, wholeheartedly. I think it's TV is just a tough industry to get into, full stop, regardless of disability. Obviously, we've got extra hurdles to get over. I think for me, what was tough was kind of getting over the initial fear of my communication issues and my speed and kind of general access to work in terms of getting to and from places. Like I said, I grew up in Birmingham for a long time. I was kind of scared to leave home, because obviously it feels safe. I think, but once you get in and people get to know you and they understand your needs and they can figure out what you want to get out of your working life, then you can get the support that you need to help you grow. It's just really important to be open with people, because people are more receptive than you think. Yeah, I think does that answer it? Yeah.
Julie, I'll come to you in a bit, Doug, because I know that you're coming at it from a different perspective. So I'll come to you, Julie, if that's okay with the same sort of question, because I think it just varies it up a little bit.
I mean, I would echo everything that Jay said, and Corey. I think you know, it's not that I want to pretend exactly, in fact, what Jay's just said. It's a really difficult industry for anyone, regardless of whether you've got a disability. And I think when I first started, I mean, I just turned 50 the other week, and so I'm old. And I think one of the best things about that I consider the luckiest things in my life is that I am as old as I am, because it meant when I was starting out in the industry, you know, staff contracts were 6 months long. You didn't, you know, it wasn't the case that you were offered a job and it was 4 weeks long or 6 weeks long. And so much depended on word of mouth. It was about what your experience was. A CV really meant something, you know, it felt like it did back then. And so for all kinds of reasons, I think it was you know, in many ways financially, it was a better place back then. But I think the difference now is that for a long time, for sure, I think when we talk about don't judge a book by its cover, I think for sure there are people that I've worked with that I know for absolutely certain that the minute I walked into the room, they just felt uncomfortable and they just didn't want me to be around. And there's lots of different instances of things where you never, I mean, when I say I know for sure, you never really know for sure, because it's a big thing to you know, confront people and say, I think you're making decisions that are based on discrimination, that you're behaving in a discriminatory way. That's really, you know, it's a really, and we should be worried about raising those questions, because it's an incredible thing to accuse someone of, or to so it's been difficult. I'm not saying that everything in my career has been a bed of roses, but I think for all the people that I worked with who were very difficult, there was a lot of people as well who I felt like never saw my disability and never saw it as an issue at all. And those people are the people that I still choose to focus on. And I think in many ways, coming from the background that I did, which was a solidly working class background, I grew up in the very north of Scotland. I had, you know, my dad was a postman, my mum was a cleaner. I had no connections whatsoever to the media, but I knew I wanted to be a journalist. And I think in many ways, I was blissfully ignorant of all the class things that were going on, as well as having a disability, you know, that you had to be posh, that posh people spoke a certain language, that they relied on familiar connections to get into the media. So I think a lot of those things are, you know, we can't, I think the industry's moving definitely in the right direction, but we cannot pretend at the minute that it is easy for people. It's not easy at all. And so I think, God, I forgot what the original question was. It's definitely a place people should work, and it's definitely television. It's not just a place that you can work. It's a place that you should look to work in, because it's a wonderful industry to be part of. And I think the only way that attitudes are going to broaden and people are going to stop judging people by the first impression that they get as they walk through the door is by it becoming much more commonplace that it is. And I think the true issue with diversity is not it's the same thing, but it's the way we look at it. So we always talk about the underrepresented groups instead of actually talking about what's important, which is that it's such a tiny minority of people that are so massively overrepresented in the industry. So it's people who went to private schools, who are white, who generally come from the south of England. Those are the people that are massively overrepresented in the industry, and that is the issue with discrimination. So I think it is a place that people should look to work, and it's important that they do look to work within the industry, because it's really important. Disability is the group that is the most underrepresented group in all of the media, and it continues to be, I think, at the bottom of people's lists in terms of challenging people. I know there are people at the BBC won't want me to say that, but definitely there's a feeling that it's still at the bottom of the list, that it's not quite given the priority that everything else is given. But I kind of think things are changing and it is becoming more important. And in my career, I never mentioned that I had a disability on my CV, but actually it was Ade at ITV, who heads up diversity at ITV, that questioned me on a panel that I did in 2016 or 17, so a few years ago. And she said to me, do you have it on your CV? And I was freelance at the time. And I said, of course I don't have it on my CV that I'm disabled. Why would I put it on my CV? And she said to me, well, how are people meant to know what your needs and requirements are? And I think, like Corey said, it's something that in my career, I just didn't even think about. I thought, if there's adjustments to be made, then I'm the one that needs to make them. And I think that has changed. I think there's a different perception now, and I would encourage anyone who has a disability to mention it in their CV if they're comfortable doing it. It's all about what you're comfortable with, but I would encourage them to do it, because definitely, for sure, at the BBC, it's something that from April next year, people are going to have to hit that 20% mark. It's a mandatory requirement. So, and that covers BAME, and it covers disability, and it covers class as well. So, you know, it's something that's worth mentioning, I think, if you're interested in getting into the industry.
Great. And Doug, I'm going to come to you last, because you come at things from a different perspective on this panel. You're the perspective of a manager, really, first and foremost. How often do you have people with disabilities applying for roles at the Natural History Unit? Because although we talk about the industry itself, you know, you're not doing enough to push disability on there. How often do you see somebody who's disabled coming in and banging on your door and trying to get a job at the Natural History Unit?
Almost. I mean, it's I'd say rare to never. And I sense, you know, that's mainly because I suppose people think that it's not for them, or because of what we do. It's, you know, we travel the world, we end up in far off and remote and crazy places, but it's got nothing to do with that, I think. I mean, we're all about making sure, you know, has a place with us. So yeah, for us it's really tricky because people don't apply, and that covers everything that Judy just said. You know, it's right across the board. It's I am sitting here as a white, you know, middle class, privately educated man, and I am a representative of the Natural History Unit, and we need that to, you know, I want to pick people because they're brilliant and awesome, and when we get to that stage, you know, which has to, I think, we have to do something positive about it rather than just sit back and wait for it to happen. So so I'm on board with this. I mean, I think this is something that's really important.
Well,
and sorry, just to, I mean, I worked in for CBBC a few years ago, and we made a series, and we took kids out on location to be part of one of our filming shoots, and I was lucky enough to go to Madagascar with a guy called Billy, who's in a wheelchair, and it was my first sort of time properly working with someone in a wheelchair, and he was I mean, he was gold. He was 13 and he was pure gold. I mean, he told me off every 2 minutes, and he kept me honest and kept me open, and it was just such an amazing positive experience for everyone that we afterwards we were like, I can't believe we don't, you know, this needs to happen more and more.
Well, I can speak from someone in a wheelchair with experience. For an angry bunch, I can understand where Billy's coming from. Sorry about that.
Oh, but I tell you, he did it. I mean, he managed me beautifully.
Good. Well, listen, you said that some of the ideas that people get is that you work in really remote, difficult places, strange places, crazy places, but that's not what it's all about. You managed to get Billy out there into Madagascar. So can you maybe, how do you accommodate people, you know, working in that sort of environment? I think have you got a video? Is it a video that?
Yeah, we do actually. I was hoping Jack had it lined up rather than myself. I don't know whether, because he'd made it was the original cut's about 10 minutes long, and that would pretty much finish our session, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a 2-minute video coming up maybe, but maybe you can explain to us how you went about accommodating something like that. Oh, here we go.
If we watch it, you'll see.
Okay then, well, let's go for that then.
Sound's always the issue. If we're not going to have sound, then I can talk over it. Neil's basically, we made a series called Animal Impossible quite recently, and Neil Strawson actually came to the Natural History Unit. He wanted to be a presenter, and has been for a while. He'd worked at Oxford University. He'd worked as a zookeeper. He'd worked as things. So he was a passionate, you know, he's a passionate animal, you know, expert. And so so when I was working with him, I sort of worked with him as a bit of a presenter, and then sort of said, Neil, you know, the one thing that we need more than anything is production people, you know, with disabilities in production as well. Just being in front of camera is one thing, but actually just being part of the entire team is also, you know, there's huge amounts of opportunities in that place. And so we took him on. He's a researcher here. We work with him, and I work with him in development, and then we work with him on this project as a researcher. You know, we had 4 researchers, and they, each of them had opportunities to go on shoots. You know, they'd helped organize them, they'd helped set them up. They'd spoken to the experts, they'd sort of talked logistics. And so, so there was 2 or 3 shoots that he had, you know, he was lined up to go on, which we then spoke to Access to Work as well. They were very helpful. They provided an extra carer, an extra person, just in part of the production team, just to sort of support Neil in whatever he needed. And we went to Wyoming, went to Costa Rica, he went to the States a couple of times actually, rode on horses. And I mean, the hardest one was Costa Rica because that's quite remote. I mean, it's a, you know, jungle in the middle of Central America. But again, it was, and we'd said at the very beginning that he was a member of the team, and so every researcher gets an opportunity to go on a shoot, and so therefore that would be the same for Neil. And you know, we will. I try really hard not to make it sound too blasé, but it literally made them. Therefore, it had to work, and so therefore we made it work.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. Honestly, from the perspective of somebody that's in a wheelchair as well, that looks like you've covered everything that someone in a wheelchair wouldn't expect to cover.
Well, you've all mentioned it. What he's really good at is telling you exactly what he's not a shrinking violet. So he doesn't, he tells you what he needs, and he makes sure that you listen. And he's also been brilliant in Bristol. The Bristol site, just from Access point of view, just said, you know, this isn't good enough and that's not good enough. And ultimately, you know, we've listened, hopefully. And like I said, that's the Costa Rica trip. That was a pretty, to be honest with you, that was pretty tough for everyone.
Yeah, who doesn't love a challenge, eh? But just for anyone who, I was listening to you there, Doug, and you said access to work. Do you know what I mean? That's quite an important thing when you work in I don't think it's just the media industry, but just in any sort of industry, like access to work is a tool that we use here. I've used it before, where basically they're there to facilitate any needs that any individual with a disability or not with a disability has. So it's good that they've actually managed to do that in terms of
just quickly say them, I mean, that although Access to Work were brilliant and very helpful, that, you know, the commitment was in place, whatever. So we would have made him.
Yeah,
we got him out. I said we would have made him. That sounds terrible. He wanted to, so therefore it was all his decision. Honestly, you know, it was a two-way conversation.
Yeah, and like you said, he's not a shrinking violet, and that's part of that's another part. Like, you need to make sure that when you're going for these sort of things, you make sure that you're ready for the challenge and you're up for it, and you can do. People with disabilities can do their best to represent themselves as well. So
yeah, I mean, he told me his challenge before him, and he broke his back when he was 20 something, and so he thought his dreams were over because he wanted to be, you know, to go on these places, go to these places, and so it was just really important, I think, just for us. I mean, it was just, you know, and like I said, after a while, I would say big blasé, just part of the team, and it's what it was. So it wasn't really a thing.
I think because we've discussed quite a lot so far in a couple of questions, which I'm happy about, but I'm just conscious of time, so I might just go and maybe ask the question that a lot of people watching or listening might be asking, is what advice would you give to anyone who's young or anyone who's starting out in the industry right now? What would you say to them if they were to come up to you and ask you a question? You know, what can I do? What should I do? How should I do it? What's the best route for me? What would you say to them? I might come to you first, Jay, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that. I think.
Sorry, I've put you on the spot there.
Sorry. I think when I did it, it was like 100 years ago. So I got in touch, and because I worked in Birmingham, I got in touch with every company that I could find. My post on the whole, and I did lots and lots of work experience. I think that's really important. I think while you're in education, you're never going to get as much holiday ever again in your life. So make the most of that 6-week break of Easter and every half term. See if you can do a day or 2 or a week or a month somewhere with someone. Just sit and talk and communicate, work out what's right for you. There's lots of different paths to take in TV. Like Corey said, it's not just in front of camera or behind camera. There's office, there's accounts, there's legal routes. So I'd say to be open to everything, if that makes sense. You might be interested in one path, but if something else crops up over here that's interesting, take a look, because you might be fantastic at it. So it's worth giving it a shot. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does, definitely. Corey, yeah. I'll come to you. I'm just conscious of time because I want to get some audience questions to you guys as well. So if we can do it in a sort of brief answer. I know that's really harsh on you, Corey and Julie, but if you know, yeah. But I'll come to you first, Corey. If you don't mind.
I'll be really quick. I'll say I think Jay hit it absolutely on the money. Definitely be open. Talk to as many people as you can. Don't be too set in your ideas. If you get a foot in the door, go and speak to as many people as you can. And maybe the one thing to do is every time you talk to somebody, ask them who they think should be the next person you approach. There you go.
Julie, I'll come to you next on that one.
I just think be optimistic and do exactly what Jay and Corey have said. I mean, I think there's no reason to be not optimistic at the moment. And I think it's so important, the attitude that you take in with you to something, because so having a disability, and I obviously I'm not, even though my disability is pretty profound, it's not, you know, I think you should be optimistic and positive. I don't think of myself as being a disabled person. I think of myself as being disabled, working class, Scottish, a woman, everything else that makes up who we are as human beings. And I just think, remember that you cannot ask for help from people, and people like Doug, more often than not, will be really super accommodating and wonderful. And so just look for those opportunities out there and really be persistent and resilient. And do you know what? Sometimes we don't come from the right class, or we don't come in the right shape, or, we come in wheelchairs instead of walking, and it doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's what you have, the potential that you have, and what you can bring to something. So really look at the different range of industries. I spoke to a girl quite recently who said that she was interested in becoming a production manager. And it was the first time I think anyone had ever spoken to me about being a production manager. And it was wonderful. And so I think really look at the different jobs in TV, decide what you want to do. I think one of the most wonderful things about Jay, in that I work with him on Escape to the Country, and he's done Great British Menu as well. And I think one of the most wonderful things about him is that he had a focus and knew what he wanted to do. And he is absolutely brilliant at it. And so I think it's about being focused and being determined and resilient. That's what I think.
Thank you, Julie. Doug, just very quickly, we talk about, what you would say to a young disabled person looking to get into the industry, but what are you looking for when someone comes through the door? If I was I'm in a wheelchair, so if I was to come in through the door and say to you, right, give me a job, Doug, I wouldn't say it like that, by the way. I might. Oh. But what would you?
I nearly answered then.
What would you say to someone who's coming in with a disability looking to work in the Natural History Unit, for example?
I mean, I think the guys have all sort of spoken. I mean, Jay said at the very beginning, getting into TV is hard anyway. I mean, by its nature, it's a sort of quite a niche, and obviously natural history is even more niche. I mean, so therefore there is sort of certain specialist requirements, really. I mean, we're always looking for people with an animal background in some natural sciences, etc., or filmmaking processes. As Judy said, there's production coordinators and managers, and there's a whole other side to things, as well as editors and composers and all sorts of things. I mean, my feeling, I just want more people applying, right across the board, and not feel like it's not for them, or if it's something they love and they have a passion for it, then just go for it. And that's, I say this quite often, I take enthusiasm over a degree any day of the week most times, but it's I'm lucky we do a job that people sort of, it's almost like a vocation. So if you think it's for you, then you should go for it, regardless of whatever circumstance or situation you think you're in.
You know what, I've got so many other questions that I could ask the panelists yourselves, myself, sorry, but we've got some questions in from our viewers and listeners at the moment, so just give me a little sec and I'm going to go through some of those. Some of them are anonymous. There's one question here. I have a learning disability, dyslexia and dyspraxia, and I have a film degree in interactive arts. I have worked as a runner on set and in post-production, but I'm looking for a role that can lead to a career and start me off in the industry. As I've got a degree, it's hard to find any apprenticeship I can learn while I work, as I'm finding it hard to get my foot in the door. What can you recommend that would help me and would help me get appreciated? I don't know if anyone would like to sort of take that on board.
There's one thing that I wanted to add to what Julie and Doug have said, is that I think if we're starting out, you've got the best contact list in the world. If you watch TV, watch credits, look for the PM, look for the exec, look for the company that made it, get in touch, email them, write to them. It's you might not hear back straight away. I think the thing that we forget is that production work for a set amount of time. So you might get in touch when there's nothing going on at a company, but that doesn't mean that you've been rejected. You've got to be persistent and keep going, even if you write into the same people 2 or 3 times. Everyone does it. I still do it. You've got to keep fresh in people's minds, so that when something comes up, they think, oh yeah, I'll hire Jay. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Jay. I've got another question here that maybe one of the other panelists can take on. Where are the opportunities to ensure we have disabled activists, disabled researchers and disabled commentators visible when the focus of programmes or items are on disability? Often when topics of disability are discussed on news programmes or documentaries, those interviewed are often non-disabled or working for traditional charity organisations not controlled by disabled people. That's quite a specific one, but I think that I suppose in short, it's to ensure that disabled matters are represented by disabled people in the media industry. I think that's what they're trying to say.
I think that's true. That's totally true. If I can just say, because I saw that question come in, and I think, firstly, it's worth being aware that I think, although you have a different perspective on it, it's not just disabled people that are qualified, I think, to speak on subjects about disability, and never make assumptions about the people that you see on television. The same way we're saying never make assumptions about us, never make assumptions about the people you're seeing on TV. For example, my boss that you work doesn't have a disability, but she had a sister who was disabled. So she had some experience of disability. My sister would never claim that she knows exactly what it's been like to live as a disabled person. But she's my identical twin sister, and she's my lifelong best friend. So she does have a perspective on disability. So I think don't make assumptions about people. I also think organizations like Scope, even if the person who is speaking isn't disabled, I think the volume and the vast knowledge they have from all of the research that they've done is worthy of being heard. And I think one of the things I would argue is that I'm most keen to see is that disabled people feature. Of course, they should dominate programs and content that is directed at the disabled community. Of course they should. That goes without saying, but they should be part of the fabric. So they should be part of the broader scope of television as well. We shouldn't just see a disabled person when it's an issue about disability. We should see disabled people all over television, and we should see disabled people off screen in working in the industry as well. And so I think I don't know if that answers the question, but I think, yes, on subjects, I can see how people would take the perspective that disabled people should be speaking on different things. But all I'd say is don't make assumptions about it. I think people probably do their best to find spokespeople to take part who do have disabilities. But failing that, there are lots and lots of different charities that have worked really hard, that work really hard every day on disability issues. So I don't think we should discount what they have to say either.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I first started on Newsround, obviously the first time I went on and presented Newsround, people saw, oh, there's that person in the wheelchair. But now as time progresses and people get to know me, they go, oh, there's Martin. They forget that someone's in the chair. And I think that's the funny thing. When people first see others, we put them in a box anyway, and we think that's where they should belong. It takes a little bit of time for people to show that they've got other strings to their bow and stuff. And you're right what you're saying. We shouldn't just be pigeonholed as because we're disabled. We should be able to talk about disabled issues, and the same goes the other way.
And I think, Martin, exactly that. What they might want to just be getting on with their job rather than suddenly becoming this spokesperson when that's not what they're there to
Absolutely.
do.
We've got another question here. As someone who is non-disabled, how can I help my colleagues in a positive way? I really like this question because I think it's just as important, actually, as talking, as coming from the perspective of someone who's disabled. I think it's a team, isn't it? Definitely. It's a two-way effort.
And I think it's one thing I disagree with, actually. I don't disagree with the Black Lives Movement. I think it's brilliant. But one of the things that you've heard argued from them is you shouldn't be looking at I don't know if Jay would disagree with this, but you shouldn't be looking at us to answer all your questions. But actually, I think as a disabled person, I'm quite happy to answer questions, because how is anyone else going to know what my lived experience is unless they ask me? And I don't speak for every disabled person. I can only ever speak for me. But I think, what was the question again?
Oh, sorry. It was about how if you're a non-disabled.
Oh, if you're a non-disabled person, how you can help people.
Yeah,
just be open and ask the questions and be friendly. And I mean, you have to look at your language, but I can't tell you as a commissioner the amount of times I hear people still saying to me, who doesn't have a leg, oh, this idea has legs, or it doesn't have legs. So if it has legs, it's a good thing. If it doesn't have legs, it's a bad thing. And you just have to take it on the chin and laugh it off in many ways, And sometimes I'll flag it and sometimes I won't. It irritates me now if I hear people using the phrase wheelchair bound, because I think wheelchairs liberate people, they don't bind them. So those kind of things that are really old-fashioned, I find a bit irritating. But I think it's all about keeping a smile on your face and remembering that if you're optimistic and you're happy and you're a kind of good force to be around, then I think people will see that and they'll be welcoming of it. And I think so I think as a non-disabled person, all I would say is just ask questions. I took some time out. I know we're running short of time, but I took some time out a few years ago after doing current affairs for a long time, to become a primary school teacher, actually, and did my PGCE, became a primary school teacher and was teaching year 3, which is 7 to 8 year olds. And 7 to 8 year olds will ask you anything. So if you've got to have a thick skin, and I think it really made me a much better person, because it made me rounded and resilient and just to enjoy my disability, to not think about it in a negative way, to not I mean, a lot of stuff is negative, and balancing hospital appointments and everything is a full-time job in itself, you know. But I kind of think, yeah, just don't be judgmental, and just ask people questions, and more often than not, they'll give you the answers, I think.
And just to add to that, I think you got me okay to laugh about it.
Yeah,
let other people. You're not the butt of the joke, but being part of a joke, if that makes sense, because it's life's too short to get upset every time. So just enjoy it. If that makes sense, enjoy the process of work and communicating about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the thing I'd add to that actually is just to say that I think if you are a non-disabled person wanting to be as supportive as you can be, just don't have lower expectations, because I think actually it's one of the big things that people with any kind of impairment will struggle with, is that sense of just knowing that, because people think that you're lacking somehow. And I think if you can be the person that tries, it goes into that kind of judgment sort of piece, but really just don't lower your expectation bar. You know, as everybody said, you know, be open, have conversations, understand what you can do to smooth the way, but don't kind of feel like you've got to make allowances as well and expect less, because I think it's just yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. I think it's about overcoming obstacles and not seeing just the obstacles that are in people's way. I think, you know, I think that, it's about not seeing the obstacles. It's something I think commissioners definitely really struggle with still, is that you don't want to push people too much. You don't want to make vulnerable people more vulnerable by exposing them too early. But if you don't take we take risks on people all the time and on things. And I think it's particularly hard in the current environment where things are so tight financially that everyone is making pragmatic decisions based on certainty, and what they don't want is to take risks. But I think, you know, look at the wonderful people that we have in our industry that have disabilities, and look at the wonderful people that are BAME, and look at the wonderful people that come from working class backgrounds, and they're all having produced incredible creative work every single day. And I just think, you know, if we're not willing to take risks, we'll never find the next great Steve McQueen, or we'll never find the next great, you know, whoever. So I think it's just being broad-minded and open-minded.
You know what? I think that's going to bring us to an end. Actually, I could honestly sit and speak about this all day, because there is so many questions, and I'm sorry to anyone who was watching or listening that we couldn't get all the questions out. But I think that what I got from it personally myself was that it's up to both sides to make this happen. It's actually shown me that there's a lot of people within the industry, with or without disabilities, who are willing to look and listen to this issue and all about it. But it's also the work of the person with the disability to make sure that, you know, we work hard to get ourselves in front of the right people and represent ourselves in the right way, you know. But I just want to say thank you very much to all the panelists, to yourself, Doug, to yourself, Jay, Julie and Corey. Thank you so much. And Mike, for your amazing BSL work. Thank you very much. That's the end of this session. Thanks very much, guys.